What's up, everyone? So, I have just a small bit of free time, not really, but to catch up on some tasks while my daughters are at camp. It's going very well. Definitely a parent that believes in being hands on and having your kids, having your children have the best opportunities in life and making sure that they're successful. So, a lot of that has to deal with not just their school, their curriculum, but their extracurricular activities. Knowing who their friends are, knowing what your children's interests are, and exposing them to positive experiences. So, one of the main reasons why I am going to law school was because of the personal and professional experiences that I've had, and how I always think about, as a mother, what would I do if this happened to my child or if this happened to somebody else? I'm a very compassionate person, and I think about people and I think about the impact that things have on their life. For example, I worked on a case where there was a young lady who experienced a significant amount of abuse and trauma. And her doctor wrote in their notes, because we had to request their records. They're applying for Social Security disability. So yes, I do work with on a lot of employment matters, EOC filings, SSA applications for benefits, whether it's SSI, SSDI, and a lot of these cases you have to request medical records, and obviously you need to keep this information confidential, which I do. And I noticed that with some providers, the things that they write about people when they are coming to them about issues in the workplace and how it's impacted their life, or even with this young lady having experienced a lot of abuse and harassment, a lot of times the doctors, depending on who's paying them, will misdiagnose them, will write that they're delusional, that they're schizophrenic. They'll pretty much discount and discredit them in their written testimony and in their medical files. Well, there's an issue with that, because one of the things that I always mention to people, before you diagnose someone, have you looked at all of the relevant factors involved? Have you actually asked them? Because most psychiatrists, what I have found in working a lot of these cases, especially even what's called a 5150, where a person could be held against their will in a psychiatric hospital with absolutely no proof whatsoever. That seems to be a significant issue in this country, because you find that the people who really are in need of actual treatment are often ignored. Look at DC, for example. Look up how St. Elizabeth Hospital has been known for a number of complaints, and they've been sued for how they treat people, their patients. There were women, when I did an undercover investigation, who are walking around there pregnant, and they have been confined to that hospital for years. So it had to either been an inpatient or, more likely, somebody that worked there. So the thing about with this particular case, and obviously I can't discuss specifics, but she had a paper trail. She had enough documentation from the job. She was in the military, so I'm a veteran. I take these things to heart. Most of the cases that I work on do involve former government employees and former military service members, such as myself, right? Just based off what I've experienced and how I was able to overcome. When I first start looking at the case, some things may be like, oh wow, can't believe that would happen. And I know sometimes it may be hard to believe someone. However, you don't call them delusional if you don't have an actual, I guess, rationale for that, or reasoning, or any evidence to support that what they're saying doesn't make sense. Like, obviously, if someone says, oh, that trash can is following me, yeah, probably not. But if a person reports that they're being stalked, they're being harassed, they're being threatened, abused, traumatized, any of these things, the worst thing you can do is say that they're delusional. It's one thing to even say that they're lying, because that would just be, okay, maybe in your opinion, you don't believe them. However, to say that they're delusional, and so when I got the paperwork back from this doctor, I was shocked. Like, you really wrote that without fact checking, without asking questions to see, because at the end of the day, what wound up happening, everything that the doctor put in their report turned out not to be true. And had the courts gone with this doctor's written testimony, it would have been very damaging to our client's reputation. their ability to move forward, even their ability to have custody of their children, to have housing, to get a job, a number of things. And so, responding back to them now, saying, do you want me to file a complaint with the U.S. Joint Commission? Would you like me to file a complaint against the board to have your license stripped? Or do you want to take the time to look at what my client has been through? And here's the proof. So the next time you want to call someone delusional for reporting abuse, don't. Because if you do, and I found out about it, I'll make sure you get sued for both slander and libel. I will make sure that your license is stripped. You will never practice psychiatry ever again. And that's part of the issue with a lot of these quack doctors, I find, especially in criminal cases. So working on a number of criminal cases, Department of Justice, a variety of things, you find that the government, a lot of times, they are the ones that hire the doctors. They are the ones that, like, especially if it's a forensic screening, getting back to the 5150. So they all work for the government. So do you really think that they're going to have your client's best interest at heart? Absolutely not. And a lot of times the after effects, the symptoms of someone being traumatized and abused is misinterpreted. And that is just completely wrong. So I definitely want to let people know, in the medical field, you need to be careful of what you write, because in a legal proceeding, it's all going to come out. And if I find that you have done something that's unethical, unprofessional, or a detriment to anyone that, has sought representation on any of the cases that I work on, I will take you down. I have no problem doing so. A lot of times I find that a lot of these doctors are barely board certified in the United States, which wouldn't be an issue. I don't have any problem with a lawyer from another country. Absolutely, I don't have any issue with that. But if you're going to be here in America, then you need to make sure that your credentials and everything is on the same level. And that goes, for the United States as well. If you were to go to another country, you would need to make sure that your license and everything is in standard. I actually busted in one abuse case. It was human trafficking involved, in fact, and it was a joint operation with FBI and Homeland Security, that one of the therapists was not licensed, was using someone's ID and someone's license to practice in the state of California. And at first they were like, oh no, you couldn't. Well, the background check came up. When I looked at the licensing information, it was old and outdated. So a lot of times there's just simply no oversight. Someone that is not supposed to be practicing in the field of medicine can just move to another jurisdiction and open a private practice, kind of like what lawyers do, kind of like what police officers do when they are disbarred, when they are fired. So I'm definitely going to look at how legislation can be implemented to address this, to address oversight. Like, there needs to be a national database to where if a psychiatrist or a doctor or someone of that level, because there's a higher standard, of conduct, there's HIPAA, there's ethical things involved. If you have damaged somebody's reputation or done something, misdiagnosed somebody, you should be sanctioned for that. I know that people make mistakes. People may misjudge. I make mistakes. I've misjudged people. People have misjudged me and made mistakes. So very reasonable in that regard. But what is unacceptable is that when people that have the ability to dramatically impact a person's life, you need to get the full side of the story. And most of these psychiatrists, they're like a 1-minute stop shop. You go in, you talk to them for a few moments, they want to write you a prescription, and that's it. There are many times, even with dealing with Social Security disability, we had to actually fight against what the doctors were writing down. And then you have these doctors who they're shams. They get with these corrupt lawyers. You have a lot of lawyers that want to charge you for Social Security Administration, and to each its own, but I feel that your fees should be reasonable, and you shouldn't be taking a huge portion of the money that they earn that they're getting. I know that everyone has to make a living, but you don't have to make such a killing. 30%, that's a lot. You expect that type of contingency offer if you're like representing a corporation, or someone's getting a settlement where it's worth millions of dollars. But if somebody's getting Social Security disability, even back payment, it should be capped at a certain amount. So if you're taking on these cases, even with public defenders, I'll tell you a good example. In Washington, D.C. right now, unless they've changed it since 2019, which they may have not, they allow lawyers who are not even admitted to the bar, the DC bar, to represent clients in criminal matters as public defenders. And they bill the government, and all they care about is billable hours. So in a sense, they're still working as a corporate attorney by billing as much as they can. And, it's not a little bit amount. Well, who do you think pays for that? The taxpayers, the government, you and I. That's not cool. Do your job. And so there was a case where, lady had to fire. We had to help her fire 5 different attorneys. They're all paid for by the government. They were all trying to allege she was a threat to herself, threat to others, all this kind of stuff, which just never occurred. And every time, they would be sent to a hospital, the impact that it had on their life, the impact in terms of their credibility, their reputation. It took her several years before she finally cleared her name. And so I was happy to be a part of that. I like seeing people be able to rebound and recover from bad experiences, So definitely with their psychiatrist, they're probably not going to have a good day once they read my email. But I do not care. I like the fact that not only do I stand up for my children, I stand up for other people and other people's children. Because many of the cases that I have, it involves families. It involves people that have lives. And to see the level, of kind of deception that goes on when people have to deal with courts of any nature. It doesn't have to just be criminal, it could be civil. I mean, let me ask y'all this. How would you feel knowing that the former mayor of DC, Adrian Willey Fenty, he was disbarred from being an attorney because he stole from an elderly client? Now, you would think somebody who has the nerve to steal from anyone, especially an elderly client, shouldn't be anywhere near public office. Yet people didn't seem to know this as much, and if they didn't seem to bother them. If I looked at that, first thing I would do is bar his ass from DC, period. And just read up on him. He's a piece of shit. And so that's a prime example of how people are able to kind of circumvent things and twist things in their favor based off the position. So you've seen judges, you've seen lawyers, you've seen doctors, you've seen people, police officers, military, federal employees that are usually held to a higher standard than the average person. And that is because of the responsibility of their job and the impact that it has on the government, the community, and everyday people's lives. So at the end of the day, I hope that this doctor gets replaced, and that's why I'm making my recommendations up to the executive director of their organization. Because one of the things that I find out is that a lot of these providers, guess where the bulk of their money comes from? Government contracting. There's a huge, industry relating to mental health, and relating to criminal justice, and relating to a number of things to where they have to contract out. And so they partner with law firms and doctors and things of that nature. And they're doing it sometimes, not all. I've met many good providers and many good lawyers. Not everybody is bad. I don't want people to get that impression. But sometimes people only seem to care about is money. The first time the client that I'm speaking about, she was denied from meeting with a psychiatrist. At a placement, she was placed in what is called permanent supportive housing. Everyone there has a mental health diagnosis. So the doctor, the psychiatrist, only comes to visit the clients twice a month. And then it's very limited hours. She told her, well, if you're having an issue with your insurance, I can't see you. First of all, if you are in a facility to which you are getting a government grant and you're getting paid by the government either way, you don't turn anyone away. You definitely don't turn anyone away in that type of setting, a permanent supportive setting. The whole goal of them being there is to have access, to case management, access to a doctor, And if you're only coming twice a month for a few hours each day, I don't feel that you're effectively serving the needs of the clients there, And so it was very distressful to this young lady to have been in this program and for the doctor to write in the reports, because we had to show the reports. She wanted to see the reports. Nobody's going to lie to her, not on our legal team, and actually show her what the doctor said. How do you think she felt when she read that? For all the things that she trusted the doctor with about intimate, details about the abuse, to say she's delusional. Really? You can prove that? I mean, how? When somebody's claiming abuse, you were not there. Just because it doesn't sound like it could happen doesn't mean that it didn't happen. Most of the time, this is why people don't speak up. So my email is very strong, and I do not care. What I care about is the client, and what I care about is making sure that this organization that does business from the government gets a new provider and has oversight, and has someone. I feel as though, you probably have a lot of other clients and stuff going on. However, you can see clients at least have 2 to 3 window slots a week for that place. I think it's about 50 or 60 clients, so it's not even a lot. Think of it. How are you meeting with everyone if you're only coming just 2 or 3 times a month? You're not, and that's part of the problem. One of the things that, they have visitors and stuff like that. So when we came by, a few of us from the legal team, we kind of observed and saw that many of the clients, are not being treated. Some of them are not bathing. We had one lady who kept coming, knocking, asking us if we had food. I'm like, what in the world is going on here? So on the other hand, majority of the staff that we interacted with and, the case management notes and everything was only up and up. This organization actually does a lot to help individuals that experience mental health. So it's not a way to ding the organization. It's a way to say, hey, you guys got to do better, and here's the reason why. And if this is not changed, you will be hearing from me again and again and again until something is done. Speaking of which, I actually had to go sit with a client for them to apply for a simple routine Social Security card. Now, you would think you could do this online. Well, for whatever reason, she was told she was not able to do that, so she had to come in person. I don't know if you've ever had to go to any of these government offices for any type of program, but the experience can be downright traumatizing. Yes, let me tell you. So we went to Social Security office, and first we had to wait in line for a good 2 hours. Then you get inside, you get a number. There is no food, there is no water. You cannot be on your phone. You have to sit on these cold, hard metal chairs. I'm like, damn, is this prison or what? Because you need to be flexible. And I felt like if you're applying for a Social Security card or something that's even for benefits, right? You can do most of it online. But why not have the ability to where providers can have a portal where they can just load the information and send it directly to Social Security Administration? That would cut down on paperwork. That would cut down on processing time, because for some people, it could take years for them to get benefits that they deserve. I had a client who actually died, and then they approved them with benefits. I'm like, really? Is this some kind of joke? So that money then had to go to their beneficiaries. And so back to what I was saying. This person did everything they're supposed to do, and I know because I was with them. And a lot of times I do not mention my affiliation whatsoever. I just pretend like I'm just a friend, just a normal person going to assist someone in doing what they need to do. As long as they sign a paper that I have power of attorney or I'm allowed to speak on their behalf, that is all fine and well. And I try to let them do the talking to kind of see how they're being treated, And they did everything, turned everything in, got a receipt, because it's very important that whenever you interact with any government agency or you apply for anything, that you get actual proof, actual receipt of what transpired, what occurred. Because for months they had been telling her with her disability they couldn't find her documents, they lost them. You're losing documents that are sent by certified mail, and she has a receipt? Really? And then at one point they just got very irate and said, I don't care if you file a complaint. Really? Well, we are filing a complaint, and we're actually going to the top of the command with this one. And so that's what a lot of people fail to realize, is that you have somebody you report to, and that, if they don't do the oversight and step in, they'll get reported to. Nobody should have to go through that. And a lot of people don't know their rights, don't know that they have the ability to not just request a supervisor, but you can request the supervisor's supervisor. And if necessary, all you need is their name. If you can't get their name, because a lot of times they will refuse to give you their name, there's always ways to find out information. I had one time a case where the police officer was very disrespectful. In fact, I got to follow up with the police station tomorrow. I actually got him on camera. One thing I always tell people, even if they wear a body camera, the first thing you need to ask them is your body camera on, and then record them. They can't stop you. They may want to, but they can't. He got very irate that I was recording him. I said, well, your conduct is giving me reason to have to record you. Now, what is your name? What is your badge number? He gave me a false name and a false badge number. He didn't know that I was going to call dispatch and immediately ask for a supervisor. So with that case, it looks like somebody's in a whole hell of a lot of trouble, because I got you on video. And I specifically asked him about the report and the report number. And he was, oh, you're not, going to be telling me what to put in my report? I didn't tell you, I asked you. And I asked you on camera. So now I have to go to the police station, show the person in charge the video, and say, how would you like to proceed? Because technically, I got out there as to rights. Is he a police officer or not? And if he is, the fact that he's giving a false name and a false badge number calls for concern. So, back to the receipt. She had a receipt from Social Security for her cards. I think she applied for her 3 children, actually. And so she already had her Social Security card. She had her Social Security cards for her children when they were very young. She needed to prove their identity all over again. No worries. So she brought all that. They gave her a receipt. Everything's supposed to be good to go. Next thing you know, they're calling her on the phone a week later. You got to come back in. You didn't give us all the documents. Wait a minute. Yes, she did. Yes, she did. And she has a witness to that. So if you ever have any issues with a federal agency, you can always contact your elected officials. Usually, congressman or senator is in a position to step in. And having worked in those environments, I will say that sometimes the people in charge of constituent services have no clue as to how the process works or how to escalate things or when something, the worst thing you can do is make excuses for other people's lack of performance, But we'll see how that plays out. But we then have to file a complaint. And we're actually looking at filing a civil rights complaint, because there's got to be a reason as to why she can never get any services. I witnessed it for myself. In a lot of these settings, they will not allow you to record. So it's very important to bring somebody with you that has power of attorney, because then they can't deny them to be in the room with you. Additionally, they can be a witness, they can take notes and give, help you, because when a person has a mental health diagnosis, irregardless of what the diagnosis is, people automatically seem to have an impression that they're stupid, that they're dumb, that you can talk to them and treat them any old kind of way, and who's going to believe them? Same thing with people that are abused. Same thing with people that are homeless. Same thing with people that even are returning citizens, But if you're in the capacity of a lawyer, a doctor, a judge, a police officer, you are automatically believed. In fact, it's automatically assumed. That's why when police officers are caught in corruption cases, caught not doing the right thing, why do you think they purposely come in their uniform? Same thing with the military, because when you see them in their uniform, you automatically assume that they have authority, that they are ethical, and that they are trustworthy. That's a problem, and that's a huge problem. And a lot of the cases that I work on, ideally, are police officers, government employees, veterans, who have been subjected to some of the worst treatment in the workplace, and the impact that it's had on their lives. It's very devastating, So these are just some examples of what has motivated me to finally pursue my goal of going to law school, to help people, to make a difference by changing legislation, by changing policies. And sometimes the most effective way is through litigation. And I'm not someone that just says sue, sue, sue. But if your rights have been violated and you've exhausted every option, at some point you need to consider what can you do to make sure that you receive justice and that this does not happen to another person. So you have some lawyers, I've worked with them in the federal sector and in the private sector. You have some that are phenomenal. Some of the people who I really look up to are public defenders. They are paid very, very little to do the work that they do. And a lot of them, you'd be surprised, are Ivy League educated. It is a personal choice, for a lot of people to go into that profession knowing they could work for a corporation, they could work for a lot of places and literally make millions of dollars. But there has to be some component of caring, of compassion, and looking at what's in the best interest of your client. Some of these public defenders, they were just willing to just offer, obviously it's prosecutor offers a deal, you have to present it to the client. But it's at the end of the day, it's their decision as to whether or not they proceed. Even if you don't agree, you have to give them the best representation possible. So we actually found out that one of the lawyers had been disbarred in Maryland, was working in DC, and that DC didn't have a requirement for that. Really? That sounds unethical, given that DC is a federal jurisdiction. Let's see, another example. One of the attorneys, there's a public defender. So there's a difference between an actual public defender and a private law firm that represents clients under the title as a public defender, because they actually get paid way more than a public defender. And at least with the public defender, it would, in DC, it's the DC office of the public defender. So these attorneys would all rent an office, not even an office space, or just co-working space at like Regus, things like that, K Street, for example, the whole lobbying shop. So the whole office building would be full of attorneys, who just all had the same address and just shared space and got mail and received services there. Very hard to track down who they actually work for. If they're a sole practitioner, then there's definitely not any oversight. So I highly, recommend to clients that before you just consider what they call a paid lawyer, because they can take your money and run and not represent you. One of the attorneys, he had been, get this, the chief of the Office of the Public Defender way out in Montgomery County, and you couldn't make it there. So now you're doing single practice in DC, and you're completely screwing up cases to the point that an inmate at the DC jail sued him for incompetence. And one of the things that I always tell people that these things should not be, and then this person can then go to Virginia or go to another jurisdiction and pretty much do the same scam shit show all over again. So I'm hoping that for the client, we're able to receive justice, that we're able to make an impact. So for the police officer that responded to a call about them, what they believe is a 5150, and would not gave the wrong information on camera, he's going to be held liable for that. Not just in a criminal proceeding, but in a civil. See, there's a lot of things that people don't realize, that if the prosecutor doesn't pick up a case or the state's attorney declines to prosecute, you can sue for civil. Most of the time, I believe it works out better in your favor if there's a criminal matter that's related. If there's a criminal matter but there's civil issues, so let the criminal matter play out, because that is going before a jury, and that holds more weight than a civil matter when it goes before a jury. So in this particular case, she won in the criminal matter, and then turned around and sued the individuals individually for abuse of power. And so that particular officer, we're getting ready to find out what the indictment's going to be, because he didn't seem to think, and his commanding officer didn't seem to think, that there was an issue with him giving a false name, giving a fake badge number, and doing this on camera. Like, what was he thinking? So clearly it's not a strong point. He has no business on the force whatsoever. And to be responding to those type of calls, there needs to be some sort of training that is done. A lot of jurisdictions, like for example, when I worked with Carlsbad Police in San Diego, they actually have psychiatric emergency response members. These are people who have taken a certification, the training to know how to deal with people. As you know, homelessness is a huge issue in this country because people cannot afford a place to live. Look at the cost of living, and for a variety of factors. So when the police respond or emergency services respond, they need to have the proper training to know how to de-escalate a situation, to be able to know the signs of abuse, to know the signs of they don't need to be doctors, they're not, but they need to have some type of training that they're not just taking somebody who's experiencing a psychotic episode to jail, or somebody that is having a drug overdose experiment to jail. They should be in a treatment facility where they can get the help that they need. If there's any criminal element attached to that, then that can be dealt with. And however, on the flip side, I found abuse of the mental health industry, to where people who commit crimes against children, who commit crimes against humanity, say, oh, not guilty by reason of insanity. And they're given maybe a few years in a facility and then released on the street. Or they're placed in a group home. Or they're put back into the community without properly being rehabilitated. In my personal opinion and professional, people that commit crimes against children and humanity should never be released. Because it's not a mental illness as to why you're doing what you're doing. You know the difference between right and wrong. You are choosing to make these choices and using that diagnosis as an excuse. So there are a lot of factors involved with looking at cases like that. But definitely having the right attorney and the attorney having the right legal team makes a huge impact. I've seen cases that literally went the correct way when it looked like they were losing by a paralegal or a legal secretary or even another attorney, a junior attorney, an associate, finding the information that the attorney might have overlooked or was too busy or didn't consider. So these are the reasons why I'm going to law school, to help people. And also it helps me with showing my family that there's always a way to handle things and to handle them the correct way. So that way you don't